Hello, fellow parents and educators. Thank you for joining me at Education Evolution, where we are disrupting the status quo in today's learning models. We talk about present-day education, what's broken, who's fixing it, and how. I'm Dr. Maureen O'Shaughnessy, your host and founder of Education Evolution and the Microschool Coalition, where we are fiercely committed to changing the narrative, to reimagining the education landscape and creating learning that serves all children and prepares them to thrive. If you are new, welcome to the podcast. Please subscribe on our website to get it delivered to your inbox weekly. If you've been around a while, have you left a review? Hi, Danny. It is great to have you on Education Evolution today.
Hello, Maureen. How are you?
Great, thanks. Listeners, today I'm chatting with Danny Bauer. Danny is an educational maverick. He coaches other leaders to their best. He does this through classes, one of the largest and most dynamic educational leadership podcasts, and that's Better Leaders, Better Schools. He consults. He has informational blogs, a ton of great resources. And some thought leaders are not practitioners. Danny is both. He's pushing the envelope on excellence in school leadership as an experienced school leader, and also as an insatiable lifelong learner himself. These are the kinds of leaders I want to be learning from. So welcome, Danny.
I am the hungry hippo of learning for sure.
Yay! Danny, let's start with why. You're making it your life work to elevate school leaders and maximize their impact. What drives you?
Yeah, the why, and the why was to improve myself, right? In 2015, I started a podcast. Before that, I went to a conference called the Global Leadership Summit. I heard from the stage that everybody wins when a leader gets better. And that quote felt like heavy to me, right? There was gravity and there was weight to it. And I reflected on my own experience. And to be honest, Maureen, if I looked at everything I was doing, I was at that conference. I think I had another one scheduled for the year, read some books, but was that enough? Was that serious enough about my own development? If the quote's true, everybody wins when a leader gets better. So after having a very candid, mirror moment, I just set out to get myself better. My lived experience was that when the district had quote unquote leadership meetings, they weren't leadership meetings. They were bring all the leaders together. Here's a checklist, do those things or get fired. And that's not how to build a meaningful vision. That's not how to have tough conversations. That's not how to dismantle systemic racism. And those things I care about. So I started talking to people like you. We just talked. We just recorded an episode. And, my hypothesis was if I could learn from your successes and failures, take action on one idea, that I would get better. And what I didn't know was that people would really resonate with that message by putting it out on a podcast. And I didn't expect that they would start asking for help. And so I lovingly call my tribe ruckus makers, those change agents in education. And now it's my honor and privilege to create resources, content for them via the blog and podcast, and serve them one-on-one as a coach or through a group experience called the Mastermind. And that's what I get to do full-time every day. And it's really quite a privilege.
That is amazing. And I completely share your passion for dismantling systemic racism and dismantling the whole institution of education and getting it right. Mm-hmm. I like that you make it so doable. Just take one idea. Everybody can do that. So very, very simple and important advice.
One of my favorite coaching questions, it has to resonate and be right for the moment. But a lot of times just asking somebody, what's the next smallest step? And you had the micro schools, and in terms of taking action, it's like, just what is that small step? Because you might have a big goal out there, right? Writing a book, that feels pretty intimidating. But if you think about it in terms of an outline and then a blog post, and each chapter is just a number of blog posts, it's like totally doable. So I really like thinking about what's that next smallest step.
I agree. Baby steps, knowing where you're heading. We coach our kids on that with executive functioning. Oh my gosh, it's huge. Yeah. So, what do you need to do first? Break it down. And I think we forget to apply it to our own lives sometimes. So, that's an important reminder. Danny, I wonder when you're coaching, you talk about these leadership meetings that there's so much that's mundane and bureaucratic. I think that leaders get numbed out and then they get resistant to vitally important evolution that all businesses need because they're so slammed with minutia and externals. What are some steps school leaders can take to not let these deterrents derail their vision?
Yeah, so like the deterrence of just the machine, the bureaucracy,
Yeah.
that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And not to derail them from their vision is what you're asking, right?
Right.
So first I would challenge the listener and the leader to consider their vision. And at a very this is basic, right? But do you have a vision that's actually inspiring? Maybe that's a gut check and mirror moment for you right now. Back in the day when we were creating stuff locally, right? I can't say that the vision was always that inspiring. You have school improvement plans, and a lot of times those just get put in, file cabinet or a digital
Uh-huh.
file cabinet, and it doesn't really guide the work of the school. And I'm also contrarian in terms of like how I teach vision. I don't believe in vision statements, right? So if it's like a sentence or two long talking about where you're going, if it's filled with jargon and all the things you think that the community wants to hear, which is like well-rounded in 21st century skills and for the future and blah blah blah, that's not inspiring, period. So I would really challenge the listener to think like, is your vision even inspiring? And we can go a deep dive into like my approach to vision. But if you get past that and you truly believe, yes, we have something that's motivating and guiding the work of what we do at our organization, then I would say, well, use that vision as the filter. That should protect you from the bureaucracy, right? And so if it aligns, then do it well and do it your best. And I want to give the listener permission to do some things at a C, D, and F level in terms of quality, especially and absolutely if it's misaligned with the vision. So that school improvement plan, nobody looked at it. I know nobody looked at it because I turned it in and it was garbage and nobody ever followed up with me, right? So why take and invest an enormous amount of time and build committees and bring all these people together and waste
Yes.
all their time if it's never going to be used? Give it a D or an F effort. Just check the box, get it done. Maybe make it a game. How fast can I get this done? Because it doesn't matter. And we know, we're afraid to say it, but we know a lot of times what is aligned, and what's meaningful and what's just busy work. So there's a difference between being busy, having a full schedule, and actually creating value for your school or your organization. So have a meaningful vision, use that vision as a filter, not creating everything at a super high level if you don't have to, and even eliminating or trying to eliminate some of those tasks too. You could say no. It's hard, but you could
Yep.
say no.
Yep. Absolutely. So when I consult, I often find that these learner advocates, teachers, school leaders, they have the passion, the vision, they have ideas, but they lack a game plan to move forward. They're kind of, wouldn't it be nice if? So tell us about the resources that you offer school leaders to help them create a plan and maximize their impact and be that value add.
Well, I guess in terms of resources, free stuff is obviously like podcasts, the blog. There's a ton of like worksheets or video courses that are all very, very accessible and free and will help you level up. I am a big proponent of having some kind of community that will be candid with you and help push you to the next level. Maybe that's working with
Yes.
me, and what's set up, or you could form your own. There's nothing wrong with that as well. I will challenge the listener. I think on social media, that's not your go-to place. That's my assertion. You can
Yep.
meet and have and build tremendous relationships and get and share tremendous information on social media, but social media is not reality. It's not the actual map of what is going on in real life. And so you need a space where you can be authentic and really push each other, dig 10 levels deeper, admit when you have no idea what's going on. And that's hard to do in 140 characters on Twitter. And it's hard to do in the cesspool that is Facebook. Now that's my opinion and I stand by it. But to me, Facebook is the technological version of the staff room, right? Where people just gossip and complain and whine. So that's just how I feel about it. So anyways, we have a community. We have the Mastermind, and it's an authentic space, a place where you can be your real self. High achieving school leaders connect there, and we do that on a weekly level where consistently, we'll read different books. So we're reading The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek right now, talking about how that applies to running a school. We share wins of the week. We do accountability, tips of the week, sharing resources. But the magic, the hot sauce, the secret sauce, I guess. I'm using a lot of sauce for some reason. I think I'm hungry. I didn't have lunch yet. And really the main value of the Mastermind is that you have the hot seat. And so there, Maureen and listener, you share your number one challenge. It's plain and simple. Like, here's what I'm going through and I don't know what to do, right? Or I have an idea and I want to make sure that it's good, that's solid. And imagine having a board of directors, a group from like 5 to 10, 12, maybe even 14 other school leaders who will provide candid feedback because they're on Team Maureen or they're on Team Danny, right? You don't work with them. They're not evaluating you. They're all high achievers. And so they're just going to tell you how it is, but they want you to be a success. So imagine that space and what you could accomplish by going to that group and saying, here's where I need help. And then spending some real time with people doing the real work and getting that kind of advice to make your plan that much better or to solve that challenge.
I love it. And your distinction between social media and real community is so important. I think people feel like I have these followers, I have this. And to me, I agree with you. It feels like it's one-sided where people are throwing out their ideas or their rants. It's not back and forth and it's not an ongoing conversation. So what you have with your mastermind, it sounds like powerful growth mindset, candid community.
Yeah, it absolutely is. So, it's think about this, right? Where else for the same kind of investment can you get weekly ongoing professional development from people who get it, others that are high achievers that want to grow, right? It's not for people on a professional development plan or anything like that, but those that want to get to the next level. And what it would cost to go to a conference if we were still having those, get the hotel and the flight and some food, you could do that for the entire year, right? And the proof that it works, the majority of members have been in the group for over 2 years, right? Like I was just talking to a guy, Gene, he's a principal in New Jersey. He wouldn't mind me sharing this.
Uh-huh.
But he basically said, my goal was to do it. I wanted to grow myself. I believed in what you offered, but I knew I was going to do it just for a year. And now I've been there for 3, right? Because he didn't realize the relationship aspect of it and how by having that consistency and having that community, how much further you'll go. And like Gene's one of the best principals I know, period, right? And this is a place that continues to grow him. So, that's what we do.
Wow. Yeah. And that is what a great testimonial. Hey, I was in it for a year and I'm still here 3 years later. that says that he's still finding value in it. And I think leaders are often lonely at the top and beleaguered. So a place where they can support each other and keep growing, it sounds magical, Danny.
Thanks, Maureen. Yeah, I mean, it is isolating at the top, and this is a place where, kind of like your motto with your school, to be seen and heard. Like
Yeah.
that's my role, to see and hear and serve the leaders who raise their hand and decide to join, so that they could be fully known. And the other thing with, I mentioned from Gene too, he's grown personally as well. He said the mastermind's actually made me a better husband and a better father and a better friend. And that was like, I didn't expect that at all. Cause we do talk about a variety of issues, but it's just cool to hear how that's impacting, across all aspects and domains of his life.
Wow. Yeah. Well, and of course, if you're helping him focus on his vision and priorities and self-growth, of course it's going to have a ripple effect. I mean, when you say that, it's like, that's so cool. But when you think about it, it's like, yeah, of course it's going to spill out into the other parts. And that's another advantage. How cool.
Yeah. And, with the family piece, like when we talk vision, and when I build vision with leaders, we don't start with the school. We'll get there. And part of my view too is like the school, you can give it everything. It'll take everything from you as well. And that's fine. There's leaders who do that and have the capacity and the space, and there's nothing wrong with it. But those of us that have a different version of a life that we want to live, or if we have a family, and we, like you missing the kids' soccer game, right? Or you haven't seen the
Hmm.
performance, and it bugs you. That really drives a leader nuts. Like, why did I miss that again? It doesn't have to be that way. So, just a small thing we do, like building vision, we start with you as an individual, right? Because you can't pour from an empty cup. Then we talk about family. From family, we talk about then the school, so that we get our priorities, in order. So that's one way, I think that Gene's been helped. But there's a weekly check-in too, and it's just trying to help me prioritize who I reach out to and make sure that they're doing all right. And it's kind of like, just a signal they put up, especially in these tough times with the pandemic. But in there, they can tell me if they need help, if they need a call. But then there's just some reflection questions that are simple yes, no. And there's no judgment or anything like that. But just things like, you drinking enough water? Are you getting an appropriate enough amount of hours of sleep? Are you eating healthy? Are you spending time intentionally with your family? Right? It's just a yes, no. Yes, I see the answers, but really it's just for them to think about it. And if they're putting a no there, then what are you going to do about it? Right. And if you see no's consistently week after week, then maybe we should talk about it, just to check in on that person and make sure that they're doing all right.
Absolutely. Yeah. What you're saying makes really good sense. I've been studying up on optimal performance, and like athletes, they're not out there performing. They do a lot of recovery. They do a lot of training. They're really intentional about all those other things for the times that they perform. And I think school leaders are perform, and very little recovery time and not paying attention to sleep and to exercise and to all those other pieces that are integral. So for you to start with the person and look at those holistic pieces and do those weekly reminders about self-care and life
Mm,
balance, you're helping them remember not to be that machine that's not as effective as somebody that is taking time for the recovery and for the personal life. That's that's so much more holistic than other leadership models that I've
mm.
seen that focus just on how you lead in your business.
Yeah, and you brought up athletes. Atul Gawande, who wrote the checklist manifesto, he wrote an article in the New Yorker years ago. It's called Personal Best. And he's a surgeon, right? He's a surgeon and an author. And definitely check out the checklist manifesto, Google Personal Best. But what he was noodling on in that article was, as a surgeon, should he have a coach, a surgeon coach? Because they don't really exist. And he's talking about Rafael Nadal, the tennis player at the time, who definitely has a performance coach. And you think about LeBron James, Michael Jordan, they have performance coaches. So if athletes care about what they put in their bodies, they care about their sleep, they're studying, and school leaders are definitely studying the craft and getting better too. But they also then have that performance coach. Why not a school leader? And I think sometimes it's like, where am I going to find the funding, right? And I'd say that a lot of
Uh-huh.
majority of the members do use school funds, but many pay out of pocket as well. Okay, let's put that aside because you'll figure that out. But I think the real issue for some people might even be the guilt. Am I worth it? Right?
Ouch.
Yeah, seriously. Like, is this amount, like, am I worth it? And school leaders so often, they were teachers, right? And teachers are the most generous group of people that I know. And they give, and give, right? And then that happens as a assistant principal, give, and you forget about yourself. And that might be partly why you're not seeing your family too. But then the am I worth it question. So I was talking to Eileen. At the time, she was a school leader in Qingdao, China. And we met up in London. She was doing a teacher recruitment fair. And so I flew from Glasgow, Scotland, where I lived at the time, met her in London, and we had lunch and then went on a walk around beautiful Kensington Park. And she said, I had to get past the leadership guilt. And I'm thinking, Maureen, what are you talking about? Like, what? First, I'm like, what did I do to make this person feel guilty? Did I guilt her, like twist her arm to join? No. So she said, I don't think twice about dressing the part. I buy the nicest clothes so I can look professional, right? But I've never
Mm-hmm.
for a minute thought about joining a community and a coaching program that's about developing my mindset and my skills. And she's like, I had to get past that hurdle. Looking back, it's funny because, yeah, it matters a bit how I dress. People care. But what matters more? How I show up every day, the decisions I make, the
Yes.
culture I build,
Yes.
right? That was a really interesting moment for me because I had never heard it before, but I think a lot of leaders wrestle with it.
You know what? I think you're right. That permission, it's different. Permission to buy a tire is one thing, but to work on my own growth, I don't know. I think we assume we're supposed to just show up as a leader and have it down. But I don't know. I've had a spiritual director and monthly meetings for decades. It's like I can't imagine not getting, support on evolving as a human. I mean, it should be a given, but you're right. There is a sense of guilt with self-care items, isn't there?
Yeah, it is. It's a bit of a weird, thing because the attire you see the suit, that you buy.
Mhm.
Let's say you buy a nice car. I mean, you get the idea. You can see the physical product, but when you're talking about, I'm going to become a better leader, this is a community, this is a professional development, it's mindset. It's just different. And so you have to be confident that this is going to work for you. And so it was scary for me the first time I hired a coach, and I'm in a mastermind as well. That was scary because I had never invested that much in my life. But now it's become a thing where I invest between 5-10% of what I make each year at a minimum on personal growth opportunities, coaching and conferences and these kind of things, because what I've learned is that that's actually what's helped me now become a success, right? I was doing fine, but that's what's really accelerated stuff. And the last thing I want to say about the development, idea and opportunity is, I work with top performers. They're normally forgotten. Because if you think about who gets the coach supposedly in a district, that's normally your lowest performer because they're, and it's a race to the bottom. It's like, okay, how do we get these poor performers up to average? But I think that's kind of messed up. Like the paradigm should be, how do we get our best even better? How do we get people in the middle to be the best? So that's just the approach that I like to take.
Yeah, and I see that in classes too. A lot of times the students that have the biggest needs can get extra help, but what are we doing for the kids in the middle or the kids that get it to help them advance? So we do have this kind of race to the bottom mentality.
Let them be. They're doing fine.
Exactly. Yeah, they're not causing any problems. So let's go with where the problems seem to be, which is unfortunate. This is a complete pivot, but I really value you as a thought leader, and I'd love to hear just some of your ideas on dismantling systemic racism, especially in the educational realm. But I think it's really hard to isolate it to that. What's stirring in you? What are some ideas that are percolating for you?
First, I think just don't be silent. You know what I mean? That bothers me. So you can't be quiet. You need to talk. You need to step up to the plate, especially as a leader. And if you don't get it yet, because maybe you don't get these ideas of systemic racism or white supremacy culture and this kind of stuff, well, become a learner, get curious. And so maybe that's how you're vocal. Here's some things that I'm reading, right? And here's what I'm learning. And then bring people together and create safe places, to have these discussions. And I think too, as a leader, don't think like you have to have it all figured out, right? Especially if this is not your wheelhouse and this makes you really uncomfortable even to bring up the topic, then get help. Get somebody that comes in. There's Dr. Sheldon Akins is great in his work and podcast. And then I'm forming a relationship and friendship with a guy, Dr. Tracy Benson. Both of them all work on these type of issues and have so much value to offer. So I'd go to them. But personally, what I'm reading in understanding where I have influence. So on the podcast, I created an anti-racist podcast playlist. So all the shows that deal with diversity and inclusion and equity and systemic racism, put them all in one place. I wrote more about it. I have quite a runway of content already planned and scheduled out. And I had to say,
Right.
okay, you like to operate that way, but right now a man has been murdered yet again by the police. So address it, right? Even though you have content written for the next couple months, it's going to sound really tone deaf if you have an opportunity here. So I changed things around and I made sure I talked about it. And then I also made adjustments in the mastermind. So we had a book, which would have been really nice, really needed in the moment. Stillness is the Key by Ryan Holiday. We're still going to read that book. And it's about how to just find those moments of peace amidst the chaos. So obviously that'd be a really great read right now. But having influence in the community and wanting to push the conversation, we read How to Be Anti-Racist by Kendi. It's not a perfect book,
Yes.
but guess what? It had great ideas that we could discuss and move the conversation forward. And I love it because one of my core values is ripple effect. And we know this, right? Grab a stone, throw it in a lake, a pond, a stream, whatever, and you see those ripples. Like I want to have that type of impact within the community. And of the 60 people in there, let's say 1,000 average, right, per school, that's 60,000 people I'm impacting. And in the last school I led was 1,800, right? So like just maximizing that. And then talking about on the podcast and the reach we have that way. So where you have influence, like speak up, step up. And I didn't claim to have it all figured out, right? But we had a space that was safe where people could be vulnerable and ask questions or say hurtful things, but bounce back from that, because we're all trying to figure it out together. And we really learned a lot. Last two books I'll just mention. I'm reading a book called Overcoming Bias by Tiffany Jana and Matthew Freeman. And I'm reading a book called Cast as well, which is on an Oprah book club. But these are just trying to be curious and learn as much as possible.
I love that. There are so many key points in there about speaking up and being vulnerable, and we don't have to wait to have it all figured out and using our influence. I completely agree with you. We can't be silent. We can't just carry on. And in our own humble way, we each have to be curious and learning and having a voice to help end systemic racism. So you captured it from so many angles. That was great, Danny.
Thanks, Maureen.
Yeah. So I have one last question for you.
Okay.
Danny, if you had a magic wand and could make a massive change in the world of educational leadership, what would it be?
Get rid of schools.
I hear you.
So
Say more.
That's and this is no disrespect, right, to schools or to education. That's the group I serve. That's where I've come from. Those are my roots. But the reason I say that is let's just talk the physicality of school. If we remove schools, what would we put in its place? And I think that's a really great thought experiment to rumble with and be creative and dream big dreams, right? And maybe it's a bit crazy to think that way. I like that though, because if even 1, 5, 10% of what that dream is can be implemented and true, I think that can move education forward. So I would, let's just say for, the magic wand, no more physical schools. They've all disappeared. So what are we going to put in its place?
Oh my gosh, that is just ripe with possibility. Love it. And it also shows you to be the big ruckus maker and leader of ruckus makers, because that is pretty revolutionary.
Yeah, don't come to me if you want tradition. Like, that's not going to work. So I'm definitely not your guy, and there's nothing wrong with it, right? But if you want to get expansive and creative and playful with the approach, and you want to bring your leadership to the next level, then I think I'm your guy for that.
I think you are too. And Danny, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, pleasure being here, Maureen. I really appreciate what you're doing, and it's just it's an honor to be here.
Inspirational, right? Danny and I share educational activism as our life mission. I'm feeling really inspired right now. Danny makes change happen and leverages change by helping leaders be seen, heard, valued, and thriving. That ripple effect is contagious and powerful. It's what Microschool Coalition is about. Our live class is shifting to a mastermind to support the ongoing challenges of microschool leaders and grow us as a community. We all need to commit to a small step forward each day to make sure all learners are thriving. Systemic racism. Wow, what a critical and vulnerable conversation. Danny's gentle yet insistent ideas are great steps to move us forward. We have a lot of work ahead of us and all need to use our voices and be a part of the change. And his magic wand? Loved it. Get rid of schools. Not in a disrespectful way, but as the dead institution it's all too often become. Just like the Pony Express is no longer our mode of transporting communication, our assembly line school model needs to be abolished. If we had a clean slate, what big dreams would we build on? What would we create? What would it take for all of our kids to be seen, heard, valued, and thriving? Lots to ponder, wonderful Education Evolution listeners. Now go out and take your baby step toward a better tomorrow. Until next week. If you're finding yourself thinking, I need to do this in my school, let's talk about it. I consult with schools to help them find new, innovative solutions to reaching every student. Let's put together an action plan. Visit educationevolution.org/consult to book a call and let's get started. Education Evolution listeners, you are the ones to ensure we create classrooms where each student is seen, heard, valued, and thriving. We need you. Let's go out and reach every student today. I'd be so grateful if you'd head over to your podcast app to give a great rating and review if you found this episode valuable. Don't wait. Please do it right now before you forget. I really appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Signing off, I am Maureen O'Shaughnessy, your partner in boldly reimagining education.